Of all the members of the Manson family, few stand out as vividly as Lynette "Squeaky" Fromme and Sandra Good. Together they represent unwavering devotion, not just to Charles Manson, but to each other. Their loyalty, which began in the late 1960s, has remained unbroken for more than 5 decades. Lynette, a fiery redhead, met Manson as a vulnerable 18-year-old cast out by her parents. Sandra came from a wealthy, privileged background, yet sought meaning far outside her upper-class upbringing. These two women, so different in origin yet so alike in spirit, became inseparable, bound by their belief in Manson's vision of ecological harmony and societal upheaval. But devotion has its price. Lynette Fromme was convicted in 1975 for the attempted assassination of President Gerald Ford, an act she claimed was meant to draw attention to the plight of California's redwood forests, and perhaps an attempt to overturn Manson's conviction and gain him a new trial. Sandra Good, meanwhile, served time for sending death threats to corporate executives, vowing vengeance on behalf of air, trees, water, animals. ATWA, a pseudo-environmental philosophy rooted in Manson's teachings. In a way, their story is a love story, though not in the romantic sense. Through years of arrests, convictions, and societal rejection, Lynette and Sandra remained each other's anchors, speaking for Manson long after his other followers drifted away. To this day, neither woman has expressed regret for the crimes or the ideology that destroyed so many lives. How do two women, faced with the horrors of what they were a part of, remain so steadfast in their belief in Manson? What kept their bond unbroken when so many others abandoned the cause? And how does their story shed light on the power of ideology to entwine individuals in ways that defy reason and morality? Lynette Alice Fromme was born in 1948 in Santa Monica, California. She grew up in a middle-class family, but the home life wasn't as solid as it looked from the outside. Her father, William, was a stern aerospace engineer, quick to anger, and her mother, Helen, learned to cope by disappearing into herself. That left Lynette caught between rage and silence. As a child, though, she sparkled. She danced with the Lariats, a local troupe that once appeared on the Lawrence Welk Show. She wrote poetry, winning awards in school. Friends remembered her as sprite-like, full of energy, with a special connection to animals. Dogs, cats, birds. She seemed to belong to their world more than her own. But by her teens, things were unraveling. The family moved to Redondo Beach, and Lynette started experimenting with alcohol and drugs. She fought bitterly with her father, barely graduated high school, and drifted into community college with no direction. Though she had connections, her high school boyfriend, Bill Sidens, would go on to manage the Doors, and she was drama school friends with comedian Phil Hartman. Inside, though, she was restless, fragile, and looking for somewhere to belong. In the summer of 1967, her father kicked her out. Just 18 years old, Lynette sat on a Venice Beach bench, sobbing and clutching a dictionary, when a man just out of prison walked by. Charles Manson saw her crying, and to him she was an opportunity. Charles Manson saw her crying. He comforted her, told her she'd be okay. For Lynette, it was the first kindness she'd felt in a long time. When he walked away, she followed, asking questions, unwilling to let go. That was the beginning. Manson read her instantly. Like a seasoned manipulator, he recognized her wounds, the angry father, the passive-aggressive mother, the longing for attention. He mirrored her pain and turned it into belonging. To Lynette, his calm words and gentle smile felt like protection. She gave herself to him out of gratitude, believing he could love her in the way her father never did. At first, though, she struggled. She wasn't used to the world of runaways and prostitutes who gathered around Charlie, and he was already living with Mary Brunner. But Lynn adapted quickly. On acid trips, she saw visions of him as part of nature itself, a deer in the forest whose eyes contained all human emotion. That vision cemented her devotion. She no longer saw Manson as just a man. By the end of 1967, Lynette was firmly at his side. She bonded with Mary Brunner, helped bring Patricia Krenwinkel into the fold, tolerated Susan Atkins, and eventually accepted even the much younger Diane Lake as her sister. She translated Charlie's world for the new women, soothing their doubts and telling them they were wanted. Her loyalty was personal. Unlike some of the other women, Lynette shared Charlie's bed often. She challenged him on gender and race, and though she later admitted he was racist, she rarely pressed too far. In her eyes, he was a flawed prophet, but still a prophet. In 1968, when the family moved to Spahn Ranch, Lynette became indispensable. Charlie assigned her to care for George Spahn, the nearly blind ranch owner. She cooked for him, kept him company, ran the pony ride business, and at Charlie's urging, shared his bed. George adored her. After hearing her squeal one day in laughter, he nicknamed her Squeaky. The name stuck, but her role was larger than caretaker. She became Charlie's eyes and ears on the ranch. She reported George's moods, repeated what visitors said, and helped keep the family in good standing on the property. She believed, as Charlie did, that when George died, the ranch would pass to her. By early 1969, Squeaky was deeply woven into the fabric of the family. When the LAPD raided the ranch that April 1969, Lynette was the only one arrested, briefly jailed on suspicion of auto theft. She was also present during a series of conversations that would have fatal consequences. George's neighbor, Frank Retz, wanted to buy the Spahn property. He complained about the family and spoke often with George about selling. Retz hired Donald Shorty Shea, a longtime ranch hand, to act as a night watchman. Shorty began telling Retz that Charlie and his group had to go. Squeaky witnessed these talks and almost certainly reported them back to Manson. To Charlie, already paranoid about outsiders, it was proof that Shorty was plotting against him. By end of summer, Shorty would be dead, brutally murdered by family members under Manson's orders. Through the summer of 1969, Squeaky's loyalty never wavered. On August 8th, the night of the first Tate LaBianca murders, Charlie told her first that Helter Skelter is coming down. She understood and told him the women needed a man with them. She wasn't in the car that night, but her role was clear: confidant, advisor, and the one who helped prepare the ground. After the murders, she stayed in the inner circle. When the family was arrested in Death Valley that October, Squeaky was among the last to arrive, just in time to be jailed with the rest. Later during the trials, she stood outside the courthouse, one of the most visible and outspoken defenders of Charles Manson. Lynette Squeaky Fromme wasn't a killer herself, but she was more than just another follower. From the moment she met Charlie on that park bench, she became his shadow. She cared for Spahn, managed the ranch, reported the whispers of neighbors, and relayed news directly to Charlie. She was his eyes and ears. Her loyalty and vigilance helped create the environment where murder became inevitable. By the early 1970s, the Manson family was fractured. Some members were in prison, others scattered, and a few still drifting around California, trying to keep Charlie's vision alive. Lynette was one of those loyalists. In November 1972, she surfaced in Gurneville, California, where family associate Nancy Brenda Pittman and others were tied to the shocking murders of James and Lauren Willett. She was arrested by police during a visit. Though not charged in the Willett killings, her presence once again connected her to the family's orbit of violence. 3 years later, in September 1975, Squeaky made her most infamous move. Dressed in a red robe, she walked into Capitol Park in Sacramento, raised a Colt .45 at President Gerald Ford, and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The gun was loaded with 4 rounds, but none were in the chamber. Fromme has always insisted she knew it wasn't ready to fire. She claims she ejected the chambered round that morning, that she never intended to kill the president, only to get his attention, to make him listen to Charlie's message. Investigators later found the missing round in her bathroom. Still, the law didn't see it as political theater. She was convicted of the attempted assassination of a U.S. president and sentenced to life in prison. At first, she was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. But after she attacked a fellow inmate with a hammer, she was transferred to Alderson Federal Prison in West Virginia. That was the same prison where years later Martha Stewart would serve time. Fromme spent 8 years there before staging a desperate escape. The rumor was that she'd heard Charlie was dying of cancer and wanted to see him one last time. She was on the run for 2 days before being captured and sent to Fort Worth, Texas, where she served the bulk of her sentence. Squeaky spent 34 years behind bars. When she was finally paroled in 2009, she was 60 years old. Her release wasn't true freedom. Lifetime parole meant restrictions. No internet, no social media, no unmonitored travel. Every move, every word remains under supervision. She settled in upstate New York with Robert Waldner, a man with his own dark history, convicted in 1988 of first-degree manslaughter for the shooting death of his brother-in-law. The pair lived together fairly quietly until a tabloid moment in 2009 when Inside Edition filmed them outside a Walmart parking lot. Squeaky, as fiery as ever, dodged cameras and snapped at reporters. In 2017, Charles Manson died in prison. The following year, Lynette Fromme published Reflection, a memoir about her years with the family. Poetic and at times beautifully written, it presents the group as flower children bound by love and freedom. The darker truths, the murders, the terror, the blood, are softened into metaphor or set aside. In its pages, she makes plain that she remains in love with Charlie. By 2025, Fromme and Waldner had separated. She was staying with friends in the Northeast and working on a follow-up to her memoir. So who is Squeaky Fromme today? She is a woman in her late 70s, living under lifetime parole, a quiet, restricted life with limited or supervised access to the internet and social media, and movement bound by conditions she cannot ignore. The system that once caged her still traces invisible lines around her days. And yet the defiance is still there. For Fromme, Manson was never a criminal or a cult leader. He was the man who found her on a Venice Beach bench in 1967 and told her she would be okay. That moment imprinted him in her mind as savior, protector, perhaps even soulmate, and that imprint has endured beyond his death. Memory, however, is fragile. Those close to her suggest her recall isn't what it once was. Time, age, and the ordinary erosion of memory seem to reshape the past. And Reflection mirrors that. Her Charlie as prophet rather than manipulator, her family as a circle of love rather than a nest of violence. It reads as selective, perhaps gently failing memory, but it may also be the only way she can make peace with who she was, let alone the price that she paid for believing. It's easy to reduce Squeaky Fromme to a footnote, the girl in red who aimed at a president. But she was more than a headline. She was Charlie's confidant, his caretaker, his eyes and ears, a believer long after others saw through the myth. And in many ways, she believes still. In the end, Lynette Squeaky Fromme's story isn't only about crime and punishment. It's about a young woman who gave her life in service to a man who promised belonging and never truly let him go. Today, living under the quiet weight of parole, she carries that love like a shadow that is never lifted, even after Manson's death. Sandra Collins Good arrived in Charles Manson's orbit in March 1968. She was 23, born in San Diego, the eldest daughter of a wealthy stockbroker. As a child, she had endured severe respiratory infections and multiple throat surgeries that left her scarred, but also gave her an edge of vulnerability. By her 20s, she was intelligent, high-strung, and restless. After studies at the University of Oregon and San Francisco State, she drifted, disillusioned with her own family and searching for meaning. At the time she met Manson, she was visiting Southern California with her boyfriend Joel Pugh, a zoology graduate and lab technician. Joel was protective of Sandy and uncomfortable with her attraction to Manson. Joel dismissed Manson as very full of himself, but Sandy was drawn to him. Within days, she flew back alone on a private jet funded by a trust account. That very night, she was initiated into the family through group sex and quickly became one of Charlie's favorites. Sandy proved indispensable almost immediately. Through her friend John Partee Friedman, she discovered George Spahn's failing ranch in Chatsworth, a rundown former movie set run by a nearly blind 79-year-old man. She whispered to Charlie that it could be their refuge. Spahn Ranch soon became the family's headquarters, and Sandy was the one who had delivered it. Life there at Spahn Ranch was governed by Manson's rules. The Bible was the only permitted book. Black music was banned. Eyeglasses, strangely, were forbidden, leaving Mary Brunner, Ella Jo Bailey, and Sandra Good stumbling half-blind. For Sandy, whose own mother she described as cold and unmaternal, Charlie offered structure and authority, yet she admitted feeling jealous and insecure. "I wasn't a warm, cuddly, motherly female like some others at the ranch," she later wrote. "I was sizing up the competition and trying to determine my place and status." Her writings reveal her inner turmoil. Of nightly meals, she recalled, "Charlie regarded the presentations as would an experienced gourmand. Slowly, too slowly for me, the dishes made their way around the circle. Sometimes I felt hostile toward anyone who held the bowls too long or took bigger bites." High-strung and sensitive, she sometimes unraveled on LSD, screaming about death, until Charlie knelt beside her and coaxed her to face it. By the winter of 1968 to 69, Sandra Good was pregnant by Bobby Beausoleil. Manson, obsessed with genetics, considered Bobby the family's top breeder. Only 3 babies were born into the family during its years at Spahn, but for Charlie, each one was part of the apocalyptic tally of 144,000 souls foretold in Revelation. Sandy's pregnancy was one more step toward that vision. In August 1969, just before the Tate LaBianca murders, Sandy and Linda Kasabian met actor Saladin Nader. Sandy, now 8 months pregnant, napped while Linda slept with the man. Days later, back at Spahn Ranch, Charlie announced now is the time for Helter Skelter, and sent Sandy and Mary Brunner to Sears with stolen credit cards. Their nervous behavior at the store, however, gave them away. They fled in a bakery truck, crashed, and were arrested. That night, learning about their arrest, Charlie seethed. "One by one, this fucked up society is stripping my loves from me." His fury was aimed not only at the police, but also at Sandy and Mary for being stupid enough to get caught. A month after the murders, on September 16, 1969, Sandra Good gave birth to her son Ivan after a long, painful labor. On the birth certificate, she listed Joel Pugh, her old boyfriend, as the father, likely to shield the baby from being taken from an unmarried, criminal mother. Joel, meanwhile, was in London studying Scientology. Sandy's role in the family was more than logistical. She absorbed and echoed Charlie's worldview. When other women told her about Sharon Tate's murder during her time in the hospital after the birth of her son, they insisted that the unborn child had passed to Sandy's arms as she held her own newborn. It was madness, but Sandy embraced it. Her devotion carried into jail. Arrested again in Death Valley that fall, she was still nursing Ivan when separated from him. The other women recalled taking turns suckling her breast to keep her milk flowing, believing it an act of solidarity. Even after the Tate LaBianca convictions, Sandy's loyalty never wavered. In 1970, she flew with Squeaky Fromme to persuade Mary Brunner to recant testimony against Bobby Beausoleil. To the press, after the convictions, she declared, they didn't want to face the fact that their products, their children, would do this. They didn't want to hear our reasons. Her loyalty also led to reckless acts. In October 1971, she waited outside as getaway driver for career criminal Kenneth Como, who sawed through jail bars and rope climbed down into a courthouse. She crashed the car and was arrested, while her toddler Ivan was placed with Partee and his wife, who would raise him for much of his life. By the mid-1970s, Sandy had transformed her devotion into a new mission, protecting the earth. She began calling radio shows and mailing threatening letters to corporate executives and officials she blamed for environmental destruction, warning that a tsunami of assassins was coming for polluters. To her, environmental collapse was evidence of the same corrupt system that had imprisoned Charlie. Her activism brought legal consequences. In 1975, she was indicted for conspiracy to send threatening letters through the mail. Convicted of mail fraud and extortion, she was sentenced to 15 years. She served 5 of them at Alderson Federal Prison in West Virginia, alongside Squeaky. While Sandy was incarcerated, Ivan grew up with the Friedman family. Despite his unusual childhood, he thrived, graduating high school, earning a football scholarship, and eventually becoming a chef. He maintains relationships today with both parents, including Bobby Beausoleil, his biological father. Paroled in 1985, Sandy was forced to live outside California. She chose Vermont, where she lived quietly, but continued to speak of Charlie with unwavering loyalty. When her parole expired, she wasted no time moving back, this time to Corcoran, near the prison where he was housed. Today, Sandra Good lives in Northern California with author George Stimson. The couple lost their home in the 2015 Valley Fire, but rebuilt their lives. She last appeared publicly in the 2019 Oxygen docuseries Manson, the Women, still defiant, still unwilling to renounce Charlie. What's striking about Sandra Good is not that she once believed in Charles Manson, it's that she never stopped. Time hasn't softened her devotion, it seems to have hardened it. Where others broke away or expressed regret, she doubled down, reframing him as both prophet and environmental visionary. From the moment she whispered Spawn Ranch into his ear, she bound her life to his. Decades later, through prison, parole, and into old age, Sandra Good remains one of his most loyal disciples. Still Blue, her nickname in the Rainbow Order, still Charlie's, even in a world that long ago left him behind. The story of Lynette Fromme and Sandra Good, Red and Blue, stands apart from that of the other Manson family members. It's a story not just of crimes and punishment, but of enduring belief, unwavering loyalty, and an unshakable bond between 2 women who have never wavered in their allegiance to Charles Manson. While the rest of the family scattered, disavowed their actions, or sought redemption, Red and Blue clung to their convictions no matter the cost. Their love for each other and their shared mission created a partnership that transcended the typical dynamics of the Manson family. Yet this devotion raises troubling questions. how does belief become so entrenched that it eclipses morality, personal freedom, and even the truth? As we examine their lives, it's impossible not to wonder whether their shared conviction was a source of strength or a tragic form of captivity. For Lynette Squeaky Fromme and Sandra Sandy Good, the line between belief and obsession, loyalty and delusion, has always been blurred. Their story reminds us of the power and peril of unwavering devotion and the complex, often destructive relationships that can form in the shadow of charismatic leaders. Among all the well-known and notorious former members of the Manson family, there are a few that remain a mystery. Some were there just so brief. They came and they left without paying the consequence that others did. And one of them is perhaps less of a mystery than some would like to have you believe.